Traveling with Intercity Bus Company Flixbus. Travel cheaply by using bus coach company Flixbus to reach your destination. Ever been to Europe? Chances are you already made first human contact with these gigantic green things you see everywhere, especially on the roads around big train stations. You also probably realize the cheapest way to travel, at least between the biggest cities, is using these green buses. These green buses literally at every single coach station, literally, and also every major bus station. That should be an and, I think. Bus and coach. Called Flixbus, and I gotta admit, Flixbus is kinda cool. The coolest thing about it is the price, which allows you to pack in more cities or adventure for fewer bucks. With bucks meaning money. So, in my huge array of journeys, I used it quite a lot, and I originally wanted to describe it in a very positive way, but I cannot anymore because something happened that tore the companies and my relationship quite a little bit apart. But let's first get to brass tacks. The company was founded a few years ago when finally bus companies were allowed to travel long distances on the European road system. It took a few years and now Flixbus basically has a monopoly in long distance buses or coaches. So especially in Germany where the company was founded, you almost always see one if you drive around on the roads. With a market share of 90%, Flixbus, at least in Germany, already totally dominates the market. And indeed, Flixbus is not a bad company at all. At its roots, it's a franchise or platform system like McDonald's, but at the same time, it kind of isn't. So yeah, that's the reason I wrote it's a franchise system. So again, at its roots, it's a franchise system like McDonald's, but at the same time, it kind of isn't. But it's very similar to one. It's basically a platform. So the company itself only has one bus, which of course isn't enough to drive around in Europe. So they ask other already existing companies to work for them, regional bus and coach companies, driving for Flixbus using their marketing, ticket system and branding, because otherwise they probably wouldn't exist anymore. This whole process was quite a small revolution, and for the first time the monopoly of the trains for long distances got competition. Nowadays, most of the railroad companies also offer more competitive pricing and special offers than a few years ago, and this is a good thing for the most part. Flix is more than a bus these days, since they also entered the train market in Europe and are offering a few connections here and there, like 2 connections in Germany. And their mother company Flix Mobility also owns Flixcar, but I honestly never heard of it until I just looked up a few facts on Wikipedia. And it's only in France, apparently Flixcar. First contact was pretty amazing to say the least. Me and a friend planned a trip around Europe, my second bigger one, with bigger meaning spanning 2 weeks, not exactly that much time, but on the other hand also pretty much time if you basically non-stop travel, even throughout the nights. So my first plan was to go with the established Interrail ticket, a ticket covering many of Europe's train networks with one ticket. But as I already had to experience firsthand, Interrail isn't the all-in-one train ticket I was hoping for. Basically, it covers only regional trains from city to city. For everything else, especially the fast trains like France's TGV, Germany's ICE, or other fast trains, you need to reserve seats. And this costs ranging from $0 to $50 per reservation on top of your actual ticket. We soon had to discover Interrail isn't the holy grail. Quote by an unexperienced European traveler realizing holy grails don't exist. So what about Interflix? Basically, Flixbus attempt to tap into exactly that target demographic by copying the branding of the European-sponsored Interrail program. Young Europeans exploring Europe for the first time. So I was like, let's try that one. since it offered very competitive pricing, at the time around $100 for using 5 to 7 connections, compared to around $300 for the Interrail ticket. Booked it, arrived at the first major coach station in a big city when starting our trip, we arrived and were kind of amazed by this bus. Being this cheap, sounded like a travel hack. These fresh new green buses with free Wi-Fi, traveling overnight or by day. The promised sockets in the buses, a game changer for me. Trains sometimes have sockets, these days more and more, but in coaches? At that time, pretty much unheard of. And it actually solved one of my biggest problems. See, we attempted a 12-day, pretty much non-stop trip, often not even booking a night in a city, but rather sleeping in trains and, well, sleeping in Flixbuses. Wherever they were available, since our trip also covered the Baltic states and a little bit of Eastern Europe, where Flixbus wasn't that dominant back then. There actually is a website that lets you share trips and counts destinations, countries and stuff like this for you. So if you want to check out our Route 77, don't know where I got that one from, but here it is. So this is the link to findpenguins.com, a website where you can do exactly what I just said. And here I basically put in my destinations for Route 77 and made it available. But this trip is topic for another post entirely, so let's get back to Flixbus again. We used it to cover main Europe, mostly traveling overnight. Therefore, I, with my Canon EOS 70D camera at the time, power banks, and an ever-empty phone pretty much had and still always have this problem of where and when to charge everything, because if you got no hustle, you got no sockets. So, quote by European traveler of unknown origin. Flixbus solved my charging problem. A night without a single socket, which in most cases wasn't even enough, meant a day without a camera, due to not being charged, or only one battery being charged and having to quit taking pictures, mid-day, considering an extra charger for the Canon batteries, and also maybe not being the only one to use the one socket somewhere. By adding sockets and later also USB chargers to these days almost all their seats, they pretty much changed the game for me. Also pretty neat, solving the one socket not enough problem almost everyone with a camera or an additional notebook faces, and maybe also power bank, batteries, fitness tracker or smartwatch, an action cam, Bluetooth headset, a headlight, an electric shaver, and most importantly maybe a notebook that previously to USB power delivery, to the USB power delivery revolution, which hasn't reached the entire world yet, charges only with a proprietary charger or connector. So here a picture of the two USB ports you find at pretty much every Flixbus seat row nowadays. USB chargers at almost every seat in Flixbuses these days, solving this problem of charging multiple devices. Only using one socket for me looked like this, using one extension cord with a multiplier at the same time to then plug in a camera or my camera charger, my multi-charger, and still being able to offer the third left socket, European variant without fuse, to someone else using the stuff I already covered in my kit. To someone else using this stuff I already covered in my kit, so this is again the backpacking all tech, where I also added recently my new multi-charger, which, short disclaimer, isn't working anymore, but it worked for like 2 years, so I probably either order the same one again or a different one. But you also find the extension cord and of course the travel adapter, which is also very neat if you have different plugs. So my kit of traveling on my first 2 big European round trips. So this kit is embedded on the blog. If you listen to this, you probably won't see this. These days, it's easier, because the possibility to use one charger to charge everything with USB, like the Satechi, the one I just mentioned, now also includes charging your notebook via power delivery, or even with standard USB-C using proprietary USB sockets offering 2 to 3 amps at 5 watts, pretty much as a universal USB charging standard these days. Also, the additional sockets, which means you can use one of the USBs to charge one single device without even using your portable charging solution, to just charge your phone and the other one for plugging in your extension cord or just your multi-charger. But what are we talking about regarding the sockets? In the beginning, you had to search for them. Nowadays, almost all seats have them installed under the seats. Sometimes there is one on the wall, meaning it's a little bit inconvenient when it's either you or the other one, and you have to figure out. I think I have had some problem when saving this article. If you or your seating partner, so we have to figure out if you or your seating partner is eligible to using this one socket. And considering being seated at the gangway, your cable just might annoy your seating partner or outright strangle him. Just like the Wi-Fi was strangled to 150 megabytes in the beginning, the buses connect to available 4G or LTE networks whenever and wherever they are available. Then you got Wi-Fi. Otherwise you don't, but in this case you still got some onboard entertainment, which isn't streamed remotely but stored locally on a media database in the buses. They got some movies and music on there, but I never really used it, so it's yours to find out how to use the toilet together with like 50 other people and one night stand, usually when washing your hands, not always possible. I made a joke in there, I just read it again, then it will be clearer. How to use the toilet together with like 50 other people and one night stand, usually when washing your hands, not always possible. The toilets usually aren't that tall. Also, usually aren't that clean after one night of 50 people using them. If it's a double-decker, and if it's not, there is still plenty stuff to be spilled, often rendering these toilets completely useless after a few hours, and with often one service personnel being the bus driver himself, there is no one to clean. Since the bus's driver often is driving the bus, sometimes there is a second person, the second bus driver for longer trips, so often not the best sanitary experience ever, especially during the end of the trip, or when everybody shortly before arrival wants to use it again. Often not possible, but still, it's better than not having a toilet at all, and having to ask the bus driver whether he will stop, because you need a toilet ASAP, but the drivers won't stop, like ever. Pretty tight schedule due to Flixbus's commitment to punctuality, which sometimes isn't actually that punctual. The seats, pretty standard, nothing fancy. You can adjust them also for sleeping, but only at an angle. And then there is this issue with using the space of the person behind you, so it only works if all do it at the same time. Booking and app, pretty good UI, would say. There is the Flixbus app, then the Flixtrain app. Flixcar doesn't have one, so picture of the Google Play Store, Flixbus app, and the Flixtrain app. But the Flixtrain app, they're only offering 2 connections in Germany, and so you probably won't need that one. You get the app, book your ticket, and get a QR code within the app, and via UPDF tickets via mail. Either print them out or just use your phone to get the code for the personal for you to scan when entering the bus, like everybody else at the exact same time, usually not queuing like Britons. It's evolution, survival of the fittest, and if your phone battery dies, well, chances are your chance to get a nice seat dies with it, considering you didn't reserve your seat. A possibility these days costs more. When I last used Flixbus, there were 2 kinds of tickets, and therefore also 2 kinds of people. Those who paid more, and those who didn't. and therefore also had to move more, making space for the first-class people who wanted to claim their seats, often occupied by the other ones. Often not the best human interaction you wanna experience ever. But this is my seat, but I'm sitting already here, but... To sum it up, it used to be cheap as hell, due to using low pricing as a marketing tool, often offering trips for a few bucks from city to city, and they still do that, apart from COVID-19. Whenever this stuff is not happening, usually these days, whenever you actually are allowed to travel, depending on current COVID regulations, you pay around 25 to 50 bucks for an overnight city-to-city trip, something totally possible if you live in real-life Disneyland Europe.